I have to put my glasses on so I can see my nose. I want to talk about books and libraries and how we relate to them in very practical terms. And the basis for this is that when we are making research in psychic phenomena, consciousness, etc., I agree very much with Brenda, who said that the primary thing is our mind, much more than machines and so on. So one of the primary tools for our mind to evolve and to be able to study these things is the written word. And the perspective of past research and the broadness of the field from other people with different perspectives than my own. So we need libraries, and I'm sure that we all have our private libraries at home, and they are very important to us. Personally, I have a library which I have developed over about, 50 years. And it's a lot of books, and not only just books, it's a lot of magazines, newspaper clippings, notes, reports, etc., etc. They all reflect my personal search for the things I'm interested in. I'm sure the same thing is for you, that our private libraries are like a little bit of a mirror of our own search and our efforts. And we have some highlights in this library, things that have really stimulated us and hopefully can stimulate others. So what I'm going to plead for now is that we realize the importance of this written material. We don't just rely on public libraries or on parapsykological association or the internet, because I think the function of these libraries goes far beyond what these other institutions can provide. And I'll try to explain why. So, what is a library of parapsychology? How do we define it? What does it cover? Well, it is defined by the interests of those who have worked in the field, their personal interest. And their personal interest in their personal search for an understanding goes far beyond what is being reported at conferences and what is mirrored in the scientific journals. It's a broader field that we draw our inspiration from. So I would say that a library in parapsychology should be a well of inspiration and also information and a historical perspective. So it covers a lot of areas. It's an interdisciplinary collection of information regarding psychology, biology, sociology, medicine, physics, physiology, chemistry, geology, astronomy, cosmology, archaeology, history, visual arts, literature, and religion, plus many other things, depending on who we are and how our personal search has developed. And I think that all these fields that I mentioned, and many others, are highly relevant. And to create this kind of well of inspiration, we need to secure that these inspirational sources doesn't disappear. So what happens with my personal library when I die? Will my children be interested? I doubt it. They take a lot of space. It's costly to keep them. You have to pay a rent for somewhere to keep it, etc., etc. It becomes a practical problem. And so many extremely important libraries of this kind has just disappeared into nothingness because there's not been an organized effort to collect them. So if we just do without it, we are risking that there will be white patches in our understanding and knowledge of the field. And the white patches, where there is no information to be found, can be due to very many reasons. Now we have recently discovered, but that is not a new phenomenon actually, but here in Sweden, we have systematic efforts of the Skeptics Society, which has the name Science and Research, they call themselves, WOOF. Vetenskap och forskning. They systematically approach all public libraries and they explain to the librarian, well, you don't understand this, but we do. These things are pseudoscience. They should not be misleading the public. So put them low, and these books are really very not good. You can throw them away, yes. And they are cleaning the libraries of lots of books. And it's not just the public libraries, it also happens at the universities. So the university libraries are being cleaned. And the librarian who can't be an expert in everything gets afraid of being criticized for providing pseudo literature and things. So they get afraid and they fall away. They don't stand up against this. So there is needed within our community to organize. We cannot rely on the institutions that we have. Then there is another risk of white patches in our background information. And that is that there is fashion in research, also in parapsychological research. Over 1 or 2 decades, one type of phenomena is very hot area. That is what's being discussed at conferences, etc. And then, after some time, no one speaks about it any longer. And the information is forgotten. And the research done and the fantastic findings are forgotten. There is no reference to it. Also, our scientific journals in parapsychology are sort of victims of these fluctuations, and there's not very much one can do about it. It's a fact. But one should recognize that many phenomena that earlier was very interesting and was the top of the subject contain information which may be extremely relevant to our time, to our present research, with all its development. In this context, I'll just point at something. I thank Erlander Haraldsson for bringing to our attention a lot of the psychic phenomena that were very hot issues at the turn of the century, between 1800 and 1900. Of mediums. Of course, we are critical about much of it, but there is a lot of important information which is needed for our present search and research. So, one could argue that, but today we have the internet. And that is true. It's a fantastic invention, the internet. And you can Google, and you get information, and you have Wikipedia, and you get so much information. It comes at snap of your finger. But someone is programming this. Someone is putting in the words in Wikipedia. And someone is choosing what books to scan and what not to scan. You can't scan everything to make it available on the internet. And again, I think that there is a need to keep and preserve and make available and organize old collections of thoughts, experiments, and research done. And the internet cannot cover for that. There are many very important pieces of research that has been done, but which never reaches the internet. I'll take one example. For many, many years, there was a man in England whose name I've forgotten, but maybe you remember. He ran a journal called Journal of Paraphysics. It was very interesting because he covered an area which no one else did, and that was the research done behind the Iron Curtain in the Eastern Europe. And it contains so much, the articles in that magazine cover so much information about fantastic findings. And so if this is true, it has huge implications. You realize that immediately. But no one has picked up on that because they haven't been reached by this information. And this little journal, its existence is not even known. I guess many of you have never heard of it. It has ceased for many years, of course. So, you can't find it on the internet, to my knowledge. So, again, a parapsykological library can contain that kind of unique journals covering a specific area over a specific time that was unique, and which has information which at the time perhaps wasn't ripe for it to develop. But wait for another 20, 30, 40 years, suddenly it becomes very important. I'll take one other example. The discoveries of Gurevich, the Russian scientist, of some kind of strange rays from sprouting seeds, was long forgotten. No one had heard about it. But we had one presentation at this conference telling how they picked it up and developed the method to do research around these living organisms and how they can affect other living organisms at a distance without being close in touch. So, but Gurevich, most people have never heard of. So again, that is an example of how a library can provide that kind of information. And it goes far, far beyond the possible efforts of a person who suddenly becomes very interested in the field to cover all these areas, to get to know all these things. They just get terribly confused. But they need a tool for the mind, and that is this kind of libraries. Okay, so I have an appeal in 4 points. Let the word go round that your organization happily accept donations of private libraries, private collections of books, journals, papers, notes, protocols, reports, photographs, etc. That was the first point, so that when some people die, you're shy to get in contact with the family and ask, oh, can we have the books? It's something you don't really do. But if the person who dies and has a collection like that has provided in his will that after my death, I'd like this collection to go to that or that society or to that person or somehow, and give the address of it, then it goes automatically. And I know many very important collections of books, papers, and notes, etc., which has just disappeared because this has not been done. The second point is to secure organization and finance to keep these kind of collections. And that is a huge problem. And we've had, this spring, we've had very hard and difficult discussions how to meet the need to keep our book collection at the Swedish Society for Psychical Research without it costing too much money, taking money from other activities. And I'm very thankful to private individuals who also are sitting in this room who said, all right, I'll support it, so it doesn't just get thrown away, which is the option, of course, if you can't finance to keep it somewhere. Thirdly, one needs also not just to keep it, but to organize it and develop such a library so that public can access it somehow, whether the public be parapsychologists or general public, and also to make it internationally available via the internet. That is to scan it and to register it and so on. And the fourth then is to somehow take the chances to organize internationally contacts between such libraries so there is an international coordination and eventually joined efforts to provide extremely good well for ideas, thoughts, and inspiration in this field. Because this field deals with what is the human mind, what is the nature we are living in, and it covers almost every possible subject. And the approach needs proper base information to go in the right direction. And libraries of this kind can provide such an input. So thank you very much for your attention.